Thank you, everyone. And as I always do, I begin my talks with a joke. So a young man is in his apartment thinking about the evening plans that he may or may not have, looks out the window and wonders if it's about to rain. So he opens the window and puts his hand out just to test and see. And lo and behold, as he has his hand out, a glass eye falls into it. He says, "What the heck?" And he looks up, and sure enough, there's a young woman up there. Sorry about that. There's a young woman up there, and she says, "Oh my gosh, you caught it. Thank you so much. I'm in apartment 352. Please, could you bring it back up? I desperately need that." So he says, "Of course." So he runs upstairs, apartment 352, knocks on the door. She opens the door, and she's a very attractive young woman. And all of a sudden, he starts thinking, well, I think I may have plans for the evening. So he gives her the eyeball, and she says, "You know, I'm having a drink while I prepare dinner. Would you want to come inside and have a drink with me?" So he says, "Well, of course." So he has a drink with her, and she says, "You know, I think I have enough prepared for dinner for you, if you don't mind, to stop. If you don't mind to have dinner with me." He said, "Absolutely, that'd be wonderful." So they have dinner, and she says, "You know, maybe after dinner we can have another drink and watch a movie." He says, "You know, I really should get going. I appreciate this. This is wonderful. We don't get a chance to meet the people in our apartment. So thank you very much for welcoming me in, but I think I should get going. But I just have to ask you, is this the way you treat every man that you meet for the first time?" And she says, "No, just those who catch my eye." So I start with a joke because the topic of my talk today, my presentation, is really not very amusing at all. So before I get to that, I wanted to give you one announcement. This is just an FYI. As many of you know, I'm the director of the Safe Environment Program, and there were a number of protocols that we, through the Doe 1 case and the Diocese of Winona, have promised to. Most of them we're already doing. One of them pertains to you, to all of us who are considered mandated reporters for the state of Minnesota. So I put that up here. This is number 8. All mandated reporters, as defined by Minnesota statutes at the diocese, shall receive specific training regarding reporting obligations every 3 years and within 30 days of their retention if newly hired. I'm sure you're thinking, great, more things to do for the Safe Environment Program. This is something that we will ask you to do in the future. It will be an online training. We'll give you more details, but I just wanted to give you that heads up so that when it came, it didn't surprise you and come out of nowhere. That's all I'm going to say about that, and I'm going to go right into my presentation. So today I'm going to talk to you about what I consider a silent epidemic. Internet pornography has become so pervasive in our culture that it truly has what we understand to be an epidemic, affecting or trending to affect a disproportionately large number of individuals within a population, community, or region at the same time. So I'm going to talk to you about that specifically in 3 different ways. Number 1, I'm going to give you the statistics on how bad this really is, just to show you that it truly is of epidemic proportions. Then I'm going to talk to you about why it is so bad. How do people get stuck in this so that it's an addiction? What is it about internet pornography that's so attractive and so alluring that people get hooked? But then finally, I apologize, I don't know how to reduce that. Finally, I will not leave you without hope, but I will give you some bits of advice briefly on how to get out of that if it is something that you're struggling with or if it's something that someone you know is struggling with. We're going to go through different ways to overcome that addiction. So, number 1, statistics. If anyone knows how I can reduce the static, please. Okay, when we talk about pornography, we typically think that this is a men's issue. So we'll look first at the statistics among men. First, I want to point out the columns here. We've got the age groups, 18 to 30, 31 to 49, 50 to 68, and then over 68. Second thing I want you to do is look at the very bottom row first. This is statistics that were recently taken from a sampling of 1,000 people throughout the United States, and they were looking specifically at the use of pornography and its impact on a person's life, work, maybe put this somewhere else. Its impact on a person's life, work, marriage, and sexual behaviors. I use their data. Yeah, maybe let's try that. We'll get rid of that. I apologize for that. Is this any better? Can you hear me? Okay. I apologize for that. We'll go a little bit quicker this way. I only have a half hour, so I apologize if I'm going a little too fast. There's a lot here, and I'm only going to give you just the tip of the iceberg on what's out there as far as statistics and whatnot. So this first one, as I said, this is a group called Proven Men, and they're the ones who've done the most recent compiling of statistics. So I wanted you to look at the bottom row first. This is the group of men that have never viewed or never view pornography. You can see that's a very small number. And then the next several group of rows, 1 through 5, is what I'm going to compile next, because that's a group of people who have at least monthly view pornography. So approximately, if you look at all of those numbers, approximately 2/3 of U.S. men view pornography at least monthly. There's another slide I did not put on here. It's how many people call themselves Christian, and it basically mirrors what we have here. So it doesn't really change among men who call themselves Christian. So again, all of these age groups, it's about 2/3 that are viewing pornography monthly. Broken down by age, 8 out of 10 men between the ages of 18 and 30 are viewing pornography monthly. 2/3 between the ages of 31 and 49 view it monthly. Half of men between 50 and 68, and those over 68 comprise of about 28%, or at least, or almost 3 out of 10. Also, there's a lot of people, obviously, by looking at this, that are viewing it on a daily basis. 3 out of 10 between the ages of 18 and 30 view pornography daily. And it's not limited to just single men. That's one myth, that this is just a bunch of college-age guys that are looking at it, that over half of married men view pornography monthly, so 55% compared to the single men, which is 7 out of 10. Another myth that a lot of people consider that, well, this is just done by uneducated folks. If you look here specifically, I want you to look at the columns again. This is the education level, high school or less, some college and college grads. I just want you to look at that. There is some variation between those columns. If you look at the number of the viewing times there is some variation, but not in the way that you might think. So it's not as if the undereducated are viewing pornography at a higher rate. Sometimes it's the other way around. Sadly, this is new. The statistics regarding women has become steadily worse. And actually, it's funny, this group, Proven Men, they actually updated their stats. So 2 weeks ago, I went back on the website and discovered that they have newer numbers. So again, broken down by age, 2 of 10, so 19% of women between the ages of 18 and 30 view pornography at least monthly. 4 out of 10 women between the ages of 31 and 49. And nearly 2 in 10 between 50 and 68 look at pornography monthly. Obviously, as school teachers and faith formation directors, our main concern is the children. As a father of 5 boys, it's chilling to know that first of all, that the largest consumers of internet pornography are boys between the ages of 12 and 17. And then also, it's alarming to know that the average age when someone is first exposed is 11 years old. My oldest son is 9. So it used to be that there were 3 A's that caused this. It promised to be anonymous, affordable, and accessible. Now there's another A that's a little bit more annoying, and it becomes a little bit more of a burden, and that is that it is aggressive. Internet pornography is coming at children today in more ways than ever, and it's coming at an alarming rate. So people are being bombarded with this. A lot of times it comes to them without anyone wanting. So why is it so addictive? Why does it get out of hand? How do people get connected and stuck in internet pornography? And I want to look at this in 6 different stages. Stage 1, curiosity. Obviously, that's the way people first get into it. Number 2, there is excitement and pleasure. Number 3, there's a self-medication that happens. And then 4, there becomes a dependency. 5, a replacement for true intimacy. Number 6, people get trapped in this cycle. So engaging in unwanted sexual outlets such as pornography, masturbation, live sex chat, escorts, paid sex, it creates a great deal of shame. There's a great deal of despair, self-loathing that goes on. Most struggling individuals don't understand that this is something that's happening specific to their brain processes. And thankfully, over the years, there's a lot of study that's been going on as to how exactly this becomes an addictive habit. The thing about internet pornography that's completely different than other addictions is that it is a very private matter. Nobody knows and nobody has to know if someone is struggling with internet pornography. Rarely does someone find out that someone went on a binge as opposed to, let's say, an alcoholic. Typically, there's something that leaves a trail with an alcoholic if he or she has gone on a binge. But with internet pornography, someone can do this with pretty much no trail left behind. So let's look at the first stage, curiosity. Obviously, as we grow up, it's natural to be curious about our bodies and the bodies of others and human sexuality in general. In many cases, experience with pornography, masturbation, casual sex, it starts out motivated by a simple curiosity. We can be exposed to things by accident, through our own efforts or through friends and family members. In any case, it's usually a natural curiosity. This isn't a bad thing. God gave this desire within us. It's something that's good. However, it's something that leads, if it's not checked, if it's not put into perspective of the way God has called us to live, then it becomes something that can be addictive. So look at here. We're looking at the way that people can be exposed to pornography. Most of this is happening within the home. 79% of people are exposed to pornography at their house, 9% at school, 7% unknown, and 5% at a friend's house. So how does this happen? Many of us know already. A link comes up as a result of an innocent word search. At my house, I don't let the boys go online any longer because it's obvious the first thing they're going to do is they're going to type in, even though they don't know how to spell it, the Incredible Hulk or the Avengers or something that they're into, and they're going to put that in the Google search, and the first thing they see, of course, is the image on top, and they'll click Google Images, and it doesn't take long to pass through pages until something bad pops up. And because of how God created us, at least boys in particular are going to zero in on that because there's something, the brain actually triggers something to say, look at that, that's important. And so, of course, they will if they're not being watched. So that's one innocent way that can happen. Clicking on a link in another site or an email, like I said, billions of emails per day are being sent that are pornographic. A pop-up can also often happen while they're innocently browsing. And then you may have had this happen, a misspelled web address can also come with results of a pornographic website. Also today, unfortunately, with the social media, people are sharing this. So let's say your friend befriended someone on Facebook or some of the other sites that they're using, and their friend doesn't have a parent that is involved in their lives, and so they're sharing a lot of this junk. And it's only, an innocent, what is he or she sharing? So they click on it because they're curious. So these are ways that people kind of get involved in pornography. And then there's just a natural excitement and pleasure. So after the initial discovery, many individuals start using these outlets recreationally. They find them exciting and arousing. Pornography viewing mixed with masturbation and various other sexual outlets trigger the brain into releasing powerful neurochemicals like dopamine, norepinephrine, and oxytocin. So I put those up here. For those of you that can't read it, in the back, the dopamine is the neurochemical that activates or enhances reward circuitry, and it makes you feel good. And it helps the brain remember what feels good and how to respond to it. And it also assists in craving for more of the activity. Norepinephrine helps us burn emotional experiences into our minds. So it's the reason that any of us who have been exposed to pornography at an early age can typically remember exactly when and where and what it was that they saw, because this burns an image into our mind. Whether it's a wonderful sexual experience with our spouse or a provocative sexual image, this chemical stores it all for easy recall. And then oxytocin is the chemical that we call the bonding chemical. It creates a bond during sexual experience. It creates a bond. They've discovered that a nursing mother excretes a lot of oxytocin, and it helps to bond with the baby. And then when a porn user is using pornography, oxytocin tries to connect them to that image or that video or that website. And one of the reasons for the feeling of basically helplessness and the feeling of loneliness is because obviously there is no reciprocal feeling. Nobody can feel something back from a video. It's pixels on a screen. So that oxytocin basically leaves the person completely lonely. So again, this is the second way that people get connected, is that there's a thrill there. Number 3, self-medication. So sexual outlets and behaviors release the same kinds of neurochemicals that are actually released during illicit street drug use. And they've been able to discover this with the brain science, that they're now able to scan the brain and notice that some of the same feelings that people get when they're using street drugs are being felt during the use of pornography. So it becomes a very quick fix for the regular stresses of our life: boredom, depression, loneliness, anger, stress, being tired, etc. And so people go to pornography to self-medicate. Again, the difficulty, however, is that nobody gets caught as if someone might if they were injecting heroin, or if they were going out on a binge and drinking. There's a lot of anonymity that goes on with internet pornography. Number 4, people then become dependent upon it. They have now created such a dependency to this that the only way that they can feel normal and get through the day is by using internet pornography, because their brain has been accustomed to getting those high levels of neurochemicals. They are now addicted, and they can't feel normal unless they get that rush. And so they're agitated, and so this is when they become very much connected to thinking about, distracted, because they're wondering about when they might be able to get the next fix. And it all has to do with the chemicals that are being released into the brain. Number 5, and this is more of the sadness of internet pornography, is they start to replace true intimacy with this rush of chemicals. So they start to project emotional connectedness to the computer and say, this person really wants me, or they know the way that I like it, and they try to assume that there's some sort of a relationship. And then what happens is they involve themselves in a fantasy world. I put up a quote from C.S. Lewis, and I'll read it in case you can't read it in the back. But C.S. Lewis obviously was not talking about internet pornography, but it works very, very well with this. He says, "For me, the real evil of masturbation would be that it takes an appetite which, in lawful use, leads the individual out of himself to complete and correct his personality in that of another." He's talking about marriage here. And finally, in children and even grandchildren. And what it does, it takes that appetite and it turns it back. It sends the man back into the prison of himself, there to keep a harem of imaginary brides. And this harem, he says, once admitted, works against his ever getting out and really uniting with the real woman. For the harem is always accessible, always subservient, calls for no sacrifices or adjustments, and can be endowed with erotic and psychological attractions which no woman can rival. Among those shadowy brides, he is always adored, always the perfect lover. No demand is made on his unselfishness, no mortification ever imposed on his vanity. And so this is, unfortunately, one of the main reasons for breakup in marriage, that the man or woman becomes completely absent in the marriage because they have involved themselves in this fantasy world. Finally, the last is what's called the avoidance cycle, and I'll just explain it here. So obviously all these negative consequences that happen, because they will happen from these unwanted sexual behaviors, will force the individual to resolve to quit. The individual will then basically white knuckle and try to force sexual thoughts out of his mind until they become intrusive thoughts. They just drill their way back in with even more power. Often he fights it for as long as he can, and then finally, worn out by the battle, he gives in. As he views the images, powerful neurochemicals flood the brain, and there's a temporary but highly satisfying relief from the battle. Finally, he thinks, I won't have to fight these sexual thoughts and urges anymore. However, the chemicals dissipate from the brain, as they always do, and logic and reason finally return, and then the guilt, the regret, and the shame set in. So the individual makes a new vow to fight the urge, and the avoidance cycle starts all over again. After repeated failures to cease the behavior, the individual starts to feel out of control, weak, discouraged, and hopeless. He begins to fear that the sexual thoughts, images, or stimuli that he might encounter every day, and he understands that this may never go away. So you can see how this addiction starts, and I don't want to leave you with this, but I first want to, before I go into, how does one get out of this, I want to talk about what the church says, because actually a lot of people don't really quite understand what the church says. So these are two quotes from the Catechism. Pornography, the definition is that it consists in removing real or simulated sexual acts from the intimacy of the partners in order to display them deliberately to third parties. It offends against chastity because it perverts the conjugal act, the intimate giving of spouses to each other. It does grave injury to the dignity of its participants, and since each one becomes an object of base pleasure and illicit profit for others, it immerses all who are involved in the illusion of a fantasy world. It is a grave offense. Civil authority should prevent the production and distribution of pornographic materials. St. John Paul the Great once said that it's not that pornography shows too much, it's that it shows too little. It shows too little of who the human person truly is. Finally, another quote about masturbation, just to show that the church does have something to say. Both the magisterium of the church and the course of constant tradition and the moral sense of the faithful have been in no doubt and have firmly maintained that masturbation is an intrinsically and gravely disordered action. Deliberate use of the sexual faculty for whatever reason outside of marriage is essentially contrary to its purpose. For here, in marriage, sexual pleasure is sought, masturbation, it's sought outside the sexual relationship, which is demanded by the moral order, and which the total meaning of mutual self-giving and human creation in the context of true love is achieved. Essentially saying that masturbation, because it does not involve true love, which is a gift of self to another in marriage, is intrinsically and gravely disordered. So there is hope. Again, I don't want to leave you with this idea that it's wrong and there's nothing you can do but just try to stop it. Understanding that this is a brain occurrence, there's a wonderful program called Reclaim Sexual Health, and they go through the brain science in order to show you how you can get out of this addictive nature. It's not just a website for people who struggle with internet pornography, it's also for those who know someone who struggles and it affects their lives. So just like Alcoholics Anonymous has Al-Anon, this would be both people could go to Reclaim Sexual Health and get help. And I'm going to use a little bit of their wisdom to show you how someone can get out of this vicious cycle. Finally, and then also, Pope Francis reminds us that the Sacrament of Reconciliation is of great help, and God will always offer his forgiveness. It's just us who tire of asking. So the Sacrament of Reconciliation is a way out. People probably think that this is the worst sin, and Father will not ever believe. He'll never believe, first of all, that we've committed such a horrendous sin, but I can assure you, knowing a lot of priests that this is something that they're very used to. Monsignor Coletti was at the Sikh conference 2 weeks ago, and he mentioned how many people came to confession with that sin. It's affecting so many of us that it's not something that we need to be ashamed of anymore. It's something we need to get ahead of. One of the things that Reclaim talks about is in this neuroscience, what they've realized is addiction circuitry can be reversed. So in the brain, you can consider these neurons firing back and forth. They create, as the habit continues, they create a highway. And when this habit is reinforced by these neurochemicals, it becomes a superhighway. And what they used to think was that the brain was stuck after a certain age. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. But that's not the case. They've discovered, thanks to these CAT scans, they've discovered that that circuitry can actually be reversed. You can start to shrink in that circuitry by adding correct circuitry. So what do I mean by that? Let's say someone learns that they can feel some sort of relief by going to pornography. If that person recognizes the reality of that situation, that superhighway is leading them to more pain in the end, if they start to recircuit by going to the true intimacy with their spouse, let's say, that superhighway starts to shrink in. Just like any habit, once we start strengthening another habit, the old habit goes away. So how many of us have already, how many of us, let's just say, made a New Year's resolution? And already it's January 19th, and maybe we're wavering, maybe we're not. But the way to strengthen that resolution and to keep it going is by avoiding the old temptations, right? And so that's what Reclaim teaches us. And they do so by copying the way that Christ overcomes temptation. Because temptation itself, it's going to come. It's not sinful. Jesus Christ himself was tempted in the desert. So after 40 days of fasting in the desert, this is from Matthew chapter 4, then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was hungry. The tempter approached him and said, "If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become loaves of bread." He said in reply, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God." So what he does here essentially is what they call in Reclaim, face it and replace it. So he faces the temptation head on. He recognized that Satan is tempting him to do something that is not licit, and he replaces it with the truth. So that's the way that Reclaim will help people to get out of this temptation, because the temptation is going to come, and it's going to promise the way that it always promises. It's going to promise peace, some relief from the stress. It's going to promise this rush, and we know in the end that the shame also comes, the disconnectedness with our family, the potential destruction of our marriage and our family. So what we need to do is replace that temptation and say, yes, of course, this temptation comes at this time, but the truth is that that's really just a temptation to look at a digital image. It's not going to bring me any closer to that person. It's going to make me feel more distant. So we replace it with the truth of who we are. So that's the way that Reclaim helps people get through it. Now I have my timer up here. I've got about 3 minutes left, and I want to share with you that much, but it's also very biblical minded. So they don't just tell you to stop and white knuckle it, because they realize that this is a drug. They call pornography the new drug, and they realize this is very similar to a drug addiction. So if we had friends who were addicted to methamphetamines or alcoholics, would we tell them, if they came to us and said, I have a problem, would we say that's ridiculous? I mean, why would you have a problem with that? No, we wouldn't. We'd say, well, there's help out there. You could go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I could be your sponsor. We could find help for you. This is not something that you need to go alone. And in the same way, internet pornography has to be treated in that way. We need to recognize that this is a problem that many of us struggle with, and that it shouldn't be a problem that we struggle alone with. So we need to be able to, first of all, admit it to ourselves. Reclaim is an anonymous program, so you can go online actually and sign up and no one has to know. so you can get assistance that way. But we also, as people of Christ, we need to recognize that this is not something that people should be ashamed of, and we need to be able to be there for them and help them. So I'm giving you lots of things to help you, and we're starting, this is really kind of just the beginning of an anti-pornography campaign within the diocese. We're starting with you because you're obviously able to affect so many other children, and you're able to help them. So